USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to the USCHO Game of the Week podcast for Thursday, February 25th, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. The big game of the week this weekend is a single matchup as Minnesota Duluth hosts St. Cloud State in NCHC action.
And joining us now in the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, the radio voice of Minnesota Duluth, that's Bruce Ciskie. Bruce, welcome to the show. And I guess I have to ask you straight out, it's 3 games without a lot of goal scoring for Duluth. Is there any panic around that team, or are they still feeling pretty stable about themselves?
Yeah, it's hard to gauge when you're not at the rink, as I usually am 2-3 times a week, and now with things being the way that they are, it's all virtual. It's hard to get a true gauge. But what I will say is, this is an experienced veteran team. They, pretty much all these guys have at least one ring, and I don't think there's panic. I think that there's urgency. I think that there's an understanding that they have to get going, and they have to start doing the little things and getting to the net, causing more traffic, all the things that you need, that you hear coaches talk about when they're not scoring goals, because UMD hasn't been scoring goals. They've scored 4 goals in the last 147 shots to goalie in the net. That's an absurdly low percentage. It's probably not sustainable long term, but they've got to fix it, because yes, they're probably safely in the NCAA tournament, guys, but with a subjective process, I don't want to be the team that finishes, 1-5 the last 6 games and stumbles into Selection Sunday and then hopes for the best.
You mentioned the offense not getting going, and sometimes I feel in college hockey that when an offense isn't getting going, the defense also sometimes suffers. And this was a team that had won, I think it was 6 straight games. They had given up 1 goal in 5 of those games. And then, they've given up 10 goals in 3 games. Is there sometimes a correlation that not only is your offense not going, but maybe because you're not seizing any momentum, that you're suddenly giving up some goals that you might not have been for quite some time?
It's a great question. It's something I've wondered for a long time, because, we've seen these stretches. Everybody goes through them. This isn't exclusive to UMD at all, but this is my 16th year. I've seen a lot of things, and I can think back to a lot of stretches where they weren't scoring goals. And one of the hallmark feelings of those stretches is that it feels like every mistake you make ends up in the back of your net. And when you're going good, those mistakes don't end up in the back of your net. Guy misses the net, he hits a goal post, the goaltender makes a great save. We saw a lot of that, of course, the last 3 years with Hunter Shepard. And I think that right now it's just that feeling you have that every time you screw up, it's going to the back of the net, no matter what that goalie tries to do about it. And the other end of the rink, you can't do anything right. I mean, they hit 4 or 5 posts in Western Michigan. Cole kept, in a 1-0 game, rings one off the post that last Thursday against Colorado College. That's a game-changing type of play. I mean, these guys have hit more iron on the ice than they do on the golf course lately. It's just been ridiculous.
We mentioned that it's a 3-game streak, a 3-game losing streak right now. There's been another 3-game losing streak this season, and really 2 of them if you kind of count shootout losses. They've responded well each time, though. Especially the last time. That was when the 6-game winning streak began. When they were winning games, what did you like about the way this team was playing?
I liked how opportunistic they were offensively. I liked the fact that they were burying chances, and it's a soccer saying, I know, but it works in hockey. Goals change games, and there were a couple times in that winning streak where things weren't going their way. They go down and get a goal on a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2 or even a nothing play. They find a way to score a goal, and all of a sudden the game's completely different. And lately that hasn't been happening, and they haven't been burying those chances, and they've kept teams in games that probably didn't belong in the game. It's the one thing, though, I will say, guys, is, and you've seen UMD enough to know this, when this team's been going the last 3-4 years, it's been dominant offensive zone possession, grinding teams down. Scott Sandelin calls it the ground game. it has not been there, in my view, consistently. They've been more the trading chances type of games, and this team does not win trading chances. I don't care, I don't care who it is. They're not going to win trading chances. And, we saw that, I think, to a certain extent, that 8-1 game against Miami, there was some up and down action. Bulldogs buried their chances. Miami didn't. The game got out of hand, and the score looks a lot worse than maybe the flow of the game was. They've got to find a way, I think, to get a little more offensive possession. They grind these teams down. You wear teams down. They make mistakes, then you pounce on those mistakes. It's been a hallmark of this program, and this team is built to play that way, and they've struggled to really get that going, I think, this season.
Bruce, you mentioned way back in the beginning of this interview that the leadership has been there. You've had some upperclassmen, and you have guys that have a couple of championship rings. You have, a lot of guys that have at least one. And I look at the top 7 scorers on this team, all juniors and seniors. Kind of put into perspective what it means to have such success from your upper class as depending on maybe some freshman or sophomore to try to carry a team offensively.
I think we've seen, UMD's done this, and they've had experienced guys that have carried the water for them. And I do believe that that's kind of become part of the culture here, is that he recruits, Scott Sandelin does recruits these 3-4 year guys. He knows he's going to have them around. And by that 4th year, you've got a guy that's going to be a consistent threat offensively. He's going to play well defensively. He understands the system, the way he's supposed to play. He understands his role in the team. And it's just kind of carried over year to year here. And there's been great captains. There's been great leaders. There's been great guys that, experienced players, Billy Exel types, and maybe didn't have a letter on their jerseys, but they were great contributors on championship winning teams. And, the younger guys all see that they want to be that when they get older, and to just kind of pass that baton on. And Noah Cates right now is in that position as a captain. He's been great. Cole Koepke, another guy that off the ice puts in all the work. He does everything that's asked of him. He's a guy that teammates gravitate to. Guys like Louis Rail, Nick Swaney that have been, such standout players in this program, and it's not a surprise to see them wearing letters this year.
Nick Swaney leading the team with 24 points. Hey, back end, you mentioned Hunter Shepard was such a stalwart for this program. 2 new goaltenders getting some time this year. What have you seen out of this goaltending core? Obviously, it's not overly experienced, and that probably is something that at times this year maybe shows.
It's kind of nice to have goalies who want to play the puck again. No, because it wasn't Shep's strong suit. He was never great at playing the puck, and it never became a big part of his game. He did what he had to do there, and now you've got guys, and I think that was an adjustment for these defensemen, these carryover defensemen, Anderson, Lelig, Louis Rail types that have been in this program for a couple of years. I do think they had to mentally adjust to having a goaltender back there, whether it be Ryan Fanti or Zach Stastl, that wants to play the puck and be involved that way, and they're both good at it, and I think that's brought another dimension to the breakouts and another dimension of this team defensively, as they've kind of got used to the defensemen to having that back there, having that luxury, and it's a different communication, it's a different style sometimes, and you do have to adjust. But I think both these goaltenders have been solid, if not very good. Stastl got off to a great start. I know that the Western game maybe didn't go the way he wanted it to, and he had a minor injury, kept him from starting a game. He's kind of been worked into a rotation here with Ryan Fanti. I would assume that Stastl will start one of these 2 games against St. Cloud State. I don't know which one yet. Fanti got the start last Thursday against CC, and you certainly can't put that loss on his shoulders with what happened in that third period. So I think they've both been good in their own way. They're a little different. Zach's a bigger guy, 6'4", kind of that prototype goaltender you see nowadays in hockey.
The beginning of January seems like forever ago right now, but those first 2 weekends at St. Cloud State and then home the following weekend, the last time before this stretch that Minnesota Duluth lost 3 in a row. What do you remember from St. Cloud State from that, and what do you know about them going into the single game this weekend and then on the road the next weekend?
I remember thinking that Saturday game in Duluth after they got beat by a goal the night before, and I knew they were going to come out and play better, and I thought they did. I thought UMD played an outstanding game that night, and David Rennick was great in goal for St. Cloud State. Defensively, they were as strong as I've seen them, and they had to be because UMD brought it that night, and it maybe wasn't it wasn't a game that necessarily deserved to be 0-0 because it was a better hockey game than that. It was 0-0 deep into overtime before Nick Perwix got the winning goal. But I thought those were 4 outstanding hockey games. Even, the worst that I thought UMD played, they lost by a goal. And they actually, had that game tied in the second period and had a couple opportunities to take the lead. And who knows how that game turns if that happens. These are 2 very evenly matched teams. It's almost like looking in a mirror and seeing yourself back in a different color somehow. St. Cloud State's very good. They've got some great talent up front. Beating Mitten's had a great year. Sam Henches can go, Kevin Fitzgerald. They're a strong team. They're I think, better defensively than people give them credit for. It's not just Pervix. Their captain, Spencer Meyer, having a very good year. Brendan Bushy just got his first career goal. Guys like Jay Cox and Donahue back there, they can play. They just don't get the accolades that Pervix does, but it's a balanced team. Rennick gives him such experience. He's a headstrong guy in goal. He has a bad moment, lets one in. He forgets about it. He's one of those kind of short memory guys, very competitive guy, the kind of guy you want on your team. And it's similar to watching UMD, and I do expect these games to be very tight, very competitive, and very defensive minded, and hopefully for UMB's perspective, because again, yes, I think they're probably in, but you don't want to stumble to Selection Sunday. It'd be great to get 1, if not 2 of these to head into the NCHC tournament on a somewhat high note.
And as you head into that tournament, single elimination and who you match up against makes a difference. St. Cloud State right now, 4 points ahead of Minnesota Duluth. Omaha just a point behind. Do you see any matchup that's better for Minnesota Duluth in this? Do they want to get to the point where they might take on a Colorado College or a Western Michigan, even though those are teams who've beaten them this season?
Dude, I ain't touching this with a 10-foot pole. You gotta be kidding me. There ain't no way. No way. And I'll be honest. If you look at this bottom 4, and yes, Colorado College has beaten UMD twice. Western Michigan just beat UMD twice, allowed 1 goal in 2 games. Miami, I know the Bulldogs beat them 6 times, but Miami gave the Bulldogs quite the run in most of those 6 games. In fact, I think they led in 3 or 4 of those 6 games. So it's not like it was easy to get those 6 wins for the Bulldogs. I don't think and then Denver, who's sitting in 5th right now, and will be playing with a high level of desperation, knowing that they probably have to win the tournament to be eligible for the NCAA, being that they're under 500 right now. I tell you, there is not a single team in that bottom 4 that anybody in the top 4 should be thinking, oh boy, I can't wait to play them.
Yeah, you're right about that, especially in a one and done. Last question about the NCHC. They're the only conference that has really pulled off getting the whole abbreviated schedule. And your observations from being around the league, how did they pull this off? And how remarkable is it that it even happened?
Well, there's 2 things that I think, and I think Josh Fenton, his entire staff, all the board of directors, all the athletic directors in the league, all the coaches in the league, and all the student athletes in the league deserve a ton of credit. But it started with the pod idea. That was tremendous. They pulled it off, 38 games, and then, Colorado College had the issue coming in, and they had to delay those 2 games. They got those in last weekend, so that's taken care of. But I just think the way that they set it up was so smart, because they got most of the air travel was taken care of. Those games were taken care of in the pod. Nobody had to get in airplanes. And we didn't know at the time, was there going to be a heightened risk involved in flying or not? UMD had to fly to a couple of series. Everything went fine. But I think the way that they set up the schedule is giving teams mutual off weekends, opportunities that, deeper in the schedule to make games up. They kept next weekend pretty much wide open for potential makeup games, which allowed the teams to move games into that weekend. So there's not a bye going into the conference tournament. That's what UMD and St. Cloud State did here this week, splitting up their series that was supposed to be played this weekend. Everything they did, it wasn't just lip service when they talked about the health and safety of the student athletes. They put that to practice in every decision they made, every move that they made, everything that they did was about the health and safety of the student athletes. And then beyond that, finding a way to get every single game that was scheduled in. And barring something really strange happening here these next 2 weekends, they're going to get every single scheduled game in. and they're going to go get a conference tournament in Grand Forks in a couple of weeks. I think they've done a great job.
Yeah, to me, it's so remarkable what the NCHC has been able to pull off. Bruce Ciskie, if you don't follow him on Twitter, at Bruce Ciskie, he's a good social media follow. Take advantage of that. But thanks for your time. Always great to catch up with you sometime in the college hockey season. Should be 2 good weekends, single games against St. Cloud State. But enjoy the hockey. Good luck down the stretch. And maybe we'll see you at a national tournament somewhere.
You got it, guys. Anytime. Thank you.
More of the Game of the Week podcast coming up.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
This is the Game of the Week podcast from USCHO.com. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly. Jim, I think Bruce Ciskie said it really well that St. Cloud State and Minnesota Duluth may almost be mirror images of each other, and this should be a great battle on Saturday.
Yeah, they've played some really good games to this point. And, when I look at teams that are hyper competitive with one another, each one of these games has been very competitive. Now it might come down to desperation. And both of these teams, when you really look at it, need these games. As Bruce said, you don't want to be hobbling into the NCAA tournament or Selection Sunday, or even kind of put yourself in a position where you give the committee the option to maybe leave you home because they don't think you were that strong down the stretch. There's some subjectivity in it this year. I do feel like Minnesota Duluth is in a nice position right now in terms of where they sit within their conference and the pairwise, but that's still concerning. Two more losses here. You put 5 in a row together to end the regular season. You don't know what happens in the next round. Maybe you're one and done in the tournament. You ended on 6 in a row. You're probably not going to find yourself getting an at-large bid.
And we don't know what the bracketology is going to look like, but I think it's going to look a lot more like what you wrote with the column you did with Jason Moy for USCHO.com than his. But if there are only 3 teams from the NCHC, a bad weekend could have you on the outside looking in. And while we're talking about the NCHC, number 2 North Dakota for a single game at number 11 Omaha. We joked a little bit earlier in the week when we talked to North Dakota head coach Brad Berry about kind of the intensity and emotion and rivalry. This could turn out to be a fierce battle for sure.
I mean, they've played so many times in the last couple of weeks here. And, the first of the 6 games that they played down the stretch here was intense. Then you kind of maybe got a little bit more composure in games 2 and 3. Then last Saturday, game 4 absolutely goes off the rails. 104 minutes and penalties. You had 2 game disqualifications and suspensions related to that. You're looking at 2 teams that have a lot of emotion. They're both playing for a lot. North Dakota, I think they're trying to keep the train rolling in the right direction. Omaha, they're trying to make sure that, like we've mentioned with St. Cloud and Minnesota Duluth, if you're going to be selected for this tournament, you want to be playing well down the stretch. I don't think that a loss would hurt North Dakota in any way, except you never know what the psychological damage is when you lose games toward the end of the season. Can that start a trend? You don't want to do that. So both of these teams will be competitive. Let's just hope their heads are more on their shoulders instead of losing their heads entirely and spending the nights in the penalty box.
When we turn to the WCHA, there's a Thursday-Saturday home-and-home series between number 3 Minnesota State, who's been stapled to the top of the USCHO poll all year, and number 19 Bemidji State, who's been in and out of the poll.
And they've played somewhat well down the stretch, in, out of the poll. You mentioned, good weekends, bad weekends. I think when you mentioned bracketology, I think I had them as one of my last teams in the field. And that's kind of what they're playing for this weekend. I believe they're 9-6-3 overall, haven't played a ton of games, but you get 1 win this weekend against a very good Minnesota State team who is right now, in terms of looking at a pairwise, they are the best team, not only in the WCHA, but they when you rank the entire pairwise, they are sitting on top. I don't think that has a lot of relevance, but it does when you're looking at how you move up within the WCHA in terms of pairwise. And I think this could be a very big weekend. If Bemidji State can go out there, play well, steal a game, maybe even 2, it's huge. And then they have to bounce right back. I think they play Thursday, Saturday, then Tuesday, Wednesday against Lake Superior State. All of these games, really big games here for Bemidji. So there's a lot of hockey to be played in a short period of time. And if they're able to have some success, win 3 out of 4 in this, boy, they could jump right up into a very solid footing with the NCAA bid at large.
In Hockey East, number 1 BC is going to play host to UMass. UMass has had a couple of weeks off as the whole campus essentially was shut down in Amherst because of a high number of COVID cases. Fortunately, for the Minutemen, they got in a whole bunch of games early on in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they looked good on Tuesday night, an 8-1 win over Providence. I was really surprised by that. I thought that the break would really affect them. It didn't seem to affect them too much, but now you've got a big test. This is a much bigger test, and Boston College has been playing extremely well. You also look not just at the pairwise, but the Hockey East Power Index. This would be a game that if you go on the road and you beat the number 1 team in the conference, a team that has had a great season, you're going to move up, and it could be something where they move into the second spot. I don't know if the first spot, I don't have the back end math on this to know if they could move up into the first spot, but if you're going to hope to be the number 1 seed in that tournament, I tweeted out earlier this week, Hockey East will not be crowning a regular season champion, whether you like that or not. But you're still fighting for the number 1 seed, and the number 1 seed will have home ice throughout the entire tournament. I think that if you're going to fight for it, it starts this Friday. And if you can win that game, then you're in a position to maybe fight for that number 1 overall seed.
Ohio State comes off of a split with Michigan, a close win, but a big loss. But they head in to Wisconsin. The Badgers at number 5 still have a chance to catch Minnesota for first place in the Big Ten. And as they go to percentages, I don't know how that changes, but this is a big weekend for the Badgers and maybe a chance for Ohio State to make a statement going into the tournament.
I mean, certainly, and they did it last weekend, knocking off Michigan last Friday. Yeah, they got thumped a little bit on Saturday, but you earn that victory. That's a pretty big upset. And this has not been the greatest year for Ohio State. So if you want to feel good about yourself heading into a single elimination, win 3 games in 3 days, and you're done Big Ten tournament, I would not mind a win or 2 against Wisconsin. And then the Badgers, on the other hand, they're trying to find their way to chase Minnesota. They'd love to have the number 1 overall seed, get the bye in the Big Ten tournament, not have to play that first round, bring it down to 2 required wins to win the championship. So there's a lot on the line, and for Ohio State, spoiler, is just as good of a role to play as any other in the league.
ECAC also has action with their teams. Things are pretty well sewn up there. Atlantic Hockey basically had the whole week's schedule wiped out this week, but one series remains, at least when we're recording on Thursday, and that is home and home, the Battle of the Bridge between Canisius and Niagara. The big importance there is the outcome of these 2 games will determine seeding in the Western Pod in Atlantic Hockey. There's still an opportunity for Canisius to finish first. They could finish second or third in that pod. If they finish first, Robert Morris drops to second, and RAT would take on Robert Morris there. 4 points from Niagara, and Canisius is in third, and they would travel to RAT for the quarterfinal round of the playoffs. It's really been unfortunate how the season really in the last 6 weeks or so is completely unraveled in that league.
Yeah, I mean, COVID has hit this league hard, whether it's actual cases, contact tracing, programs going on pause. It's really hard. And we've seen it all season. It's just the timing. If you're going to have problems, you'd probably rather have Hockey East related problems where they couldn't get their season off the ground and things were going slow back in mid-November into December, as opposed to now having the end of the season where you're trying to get games played, you're canceling games every weekend, you can't seem to get any consistency. And now you have a tournament where, there's peril when you get into the postseason. If you have teams still on, COVID pause and you're about to start your postseason, you're literally just eliminating them and ending their season. It's not, it doesn't feel like a fair way to do things, but it's the reality that every league is going to face here. But, I look at this, Canisius, this is a team that had not played a ton of games, but had some success. And then, last week they struggled out at Air Force, only took 1 out of 6 points. They're trying to get their season back on the tracks, amid a lot of pauses. So a lot on the line, it feels, for Canisius and, Niagara, they just want to be playing confident as they head down the stretch here.
Well, it's going to be a good weekend of hockey for what hockey gets played and what you're able to catch on streaming video and on national TV on Saturday. It's St. Cloud State at Minnesota Duluth. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.